Hello, and welcome to the What If South is a podcast, where we talk about the ups and downs of creating worlds from scratch and all the misadventures we experience along the way. In a nutshell, how to wing it like an author. I am Xtina Lefebvre, and I'm in the middle of writing my first book, which, since last week, I've actually given a proper working title. I'm calling it Cogs and Arrows. And I'm here with my co-host, Derrick Hall.
And I'm Derrick Hall, author and creator of the Crimson Prophecy series. We're getting really close to the release of Book 1 on November 10th, and it's getting exciting.
Oh, I'm excited for you as well.
I'm nervous.
So, Derrick, what are you reading or watching that's pretty interesting right now?
I'm still working on that Hitler memoir, Hitler's Last Witness. Getting through that slowly since that's my secondary read at the moment, and I'm almost done with He Who Fights with Monsters number 7, which is the lit RPG fantasy nonsense that I'm way too addicted to.
I haven't added any new books nor finished the reading from the list last week. But as for watching, I gotta say, I really enjoyed the She-Hulk Attorney at Law Season 1 finale. That was fantastic. Bravo. I had a great time watching that.
I haven't gotten around to that one yet.
Lots of opinions online about it, but I'm a fan. And I did dig back into a book I had read a long time ago, Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody, polishing up my... It's great. It's awesome. I'm brushing up on some of my outlining, which you know I love to do.
I don't know how you tolerate that.
I don't know how you do it without it.
Aren't we here to tell people how to wing it? Is planning the opposite of winging it?
Not really, because we're building a world. We have to make decisions, and that's kind of winging it.
Okay, if you say so.
You'll see. Just keep listening. You'll hear. You'll see. Okay, let's start off with another important thing. What are you drinking today?
Ooh. I have something that I think I wrote off prematurely when I first tried it. It is the Guinness Nitro Cold Brew Stout, which is Guinness Stout brewed with espresso, and it is delicious.
Oh, I've tried it. I agree. It's great. I'm with you. It's good.
I'll try not to drink it too fast.
Please don't.
Yeah, no, it's hitting the spot tonight. What do you have?
I really wanted Bloody Mary. I was planning on doing it, but when it came down to it, I actually decided nothing that savory. I went with something I'm calling Hardly Peach. Just basically peach juice and vodka.
Okay. If it gets the job done.
We'll see how I feel by the end of this podcast tonight.
I've discovered over the years that anything peach goes ridiculously well with bourbon.
I wish my bar was bigger than what I have. But yes, that sounds good.
Yes. There's a particular energy drink that comes in a peach flavor. I think it's called Rain. Like a king, Rain, R-E.
Oh.
I can't spell N. And they have a peach one, and that just ridiculously cold over bourbon is delicious.
I have to take some notes.
It's really good. But, anywho,
if you're listening for the first time, just to recap, what we like to do on each episode is we like to play a little game. We have a list of 20 what-if questions. And live, while you listen, we roll a die, and depending upon where that die lands, we'll pick that topic, and that's what we'll talk about today. We'll talk about that topic as it relates to our specific worlds. Sound good?
Works for me.
All right. If you're ready, anytime now, you can roll that handy-dandy die.
All right. Tonight, we have rolled a 3. And the question of the week is, what if anyone could learn to fly?
All right. That's an interesting question. What if anyone could learn to fly? So, because my world is set in a little more urban-centric, anyone could learn to fly because I have blimps.
I don't know if that's really holding to the spirit
But
of the question there.
so anyone could learn to fly because I do have blimps, but I know, what if they could just fly on their own? The problem with this is that in my world, everyone has one or more magical abilities, and they know around puberty what their magical ability is. But that being said, what if everyone could fly? Meaning, what if there's some way that they could add that magical ability? That's interesting. I'm trying to think of how that would change everything. So let's talk a little bit about how my world would work. I needed to create a way for people to travel in this world besides blimps. So I created portals so people can port from one place to another within the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually three kinds of portals. There's the bridges, and the bridges allow people to go from a different alternate parallel Earth to this planet Cobb. And then there's the personal portals that when you stand on it, as long as you know the name of the place where you're going, you can just end up there. And if you have the magical ability to port. And the third kind is a fixed portal between 2 points. So why would they need to fly? And what if they could fly? How would that change my world? I think I need a moment to think on this. So while I'm thinking, I'm going to put you on the spot and make you answer the question for your...
Okay. So in my world, in the world of Ketra, to answer this very simply, anyone can fly if they have significant enough magical ability to do so. That's not to say that anyone does necessarily, but that does allow for the possibility. My magic system is very soft. There's a set of firm rules, and then beyond that, the sky's the limit. Proverbially speaking, no pun intended, but basically, if you can think of how to do it and accurately judge how much magical energy to put into it, you can do it.
Just before you go forward, because we might have some newbie writers that are like ourselves listening, what is soft magic? What do you mean by that?
I actually made a TikTok on this subject. So there are essentially two branches of magic in fantasy. There is soft magic and hard magic. Hard magic is going to be something like Harry Potter, where you have to know the spell, you have to know the wand movement, it takes practice, it has to be done exactly right in order for it to work. Hence the school of witchcraft and wizardry that we have all come to know and love. On the opposite end of that spectrum is soft magic, which would be something more like Lord of the Rings or my books, where Gandalf can just do stuff. It's not really explained how, it's not really explained like the mechanics of why it works or how it works, but it works. And when you're reading these different stories, you don't really think twice about, oh, soft magic, hard magic. You just kind of fall into it and it becomes part of the world. And that's the goal with any magic system, but in this particular case, and from a writing perspective, I chose to go with a softer magic system. Like, if 0 is completely soft and 10 is hard as nails, I'm like a 3. So I'm on the softer side, and what that allowed me to do is it gave me freedom to, as a pantser, a non-plotter, one who despises planning anything or writing outlines, unlike my lovely co-host, it has given me the ability to, rather lazily, in some people's opinions, write myself out of corners.
Okay.
And I had this discussion with somebody in a Discord server the other day that I'm part of. They were asking a question about how to do something specifically in their world without the use of magic. I'm like, well, if your magic system allows for it, it's a good way to work yourself out of a corner without it seeming out of place in the world. So if you need to do something in a fight, some crazy triple twist spin backflip with nothing to jump off of or something ridiculous like that, and your world allows for that jump to be augmented by magic somehow, like a Jedi jumping over a building, you can do that if the system allows for it, which is a benefit in my mind of softer magic systems. They were like, no, my system's too hard for that. And I'm like, all right, fine, we'll do this. That'll probably work better.
Yeah, I think that my system is it's definitely on the hard side. It's not a soft magic.
And I would agree with that
Yeah.
based on what I know of your
But
world.
anyway, so people can now, you're saying that the question is, what if anybody could fly? And you're saying anybody can as long as they have magic.
Anyone can cook. Only the fearless can be great.
Copyright Pixar. Yes. So, in the immortal words of Chef Cousteau of Pixar fame, yes, anyone can fly if they have the knowledge and the skill to do so. I'm working on the second book of my trilogy, and tiny spoiler, one of my characters figures out how to fly. And it's not I fell in a chemical vat and now I'm Superman. It's one of those instances of like observing nature and seeing how a flying squirrel jumps between trees and going, I wonder if I could do that. A little bit of experimentation, perhaps a little bit of reckless experimentation in jumping off of mountains, and hey, guess what? This character has figured out how to fly. It's not something that is off limits, and it is not something that can't be done. It's just something that you have to be inventive enough, knowledgeable enough, and fearless enough to figure out for yourself. Because in my world, yes, there's magic, but it has been extremely limited for thousands of years. There really hasn't been a whole lot of magic use going on for about 3,000 years, and about the largest extent of the magic use was lighting a candle. That's about all that people could do because the wild magic or ambient magic, I use the terms interchangeably, was so limited in the world due to other circumstances and things that happened in the past.
Interesting.
Presently, in Book 2, in the story where I am now, that source of wild magic has been restored, so it is much more accessible to anyone with the knowledge or the reckless abandon to try stuff.
How much of an advantage is it for a person to being able to fly?
Thus far, for that character, it's proved pretty handy until she crashed into a building. There's a learning curve to it, just like anything. You're not going to immediately be perfect at
Which
anything
I appreciate
you try.
in stories.
Yes. There has to be an element of humanity in a story or it's just not going to hold together very well. Which is how I got myself into the mess of Googling how to flirt without being creepy, because I have characters that need to feel like real people with real emotions in real relationships, and I had no clue how to write it.
So, going back to my world, because this helped me think for a moment, everyone is born with a specific, or 3 or 4, I don't think anyone has any more than like 4 magical abilities. And they know by the time they go through puberty what their abilities are. However, there is a magical ability that can take another person's obligation and give it to another person for a set amount of time. So they could, I guess, as long as... But see, that means that I've never actually considered a magical ability in my world of someone being able to fly. That has never been a consideration.
You haven't found yourself in the place where I've been lately of having to figure out, what if everyone else figures this out, and now we have to figure out air traffic control in a world without radios.
Believe me, I have my own problems, but flying humans wasn't one of them.
Aw.
I will say this. If people could magically fly, it would totally change my story. The world would be totally different. The story would be different.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, it would totally change everything.
Mm-hmm. It's a really big logistical change. Like, if you actually stop and think about it, or even look at our world and real history, from the point that the airplane became viable, technology accelerated, trade accelerated, and innovation accelerated. You have the Wright brothers who went from bicycles to airplanes in like 10 years. Yeah. And then about 10 years after that...
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, we went to the moon in, 70 years? Well, less from the first flight, because that was 1900-something. My history brain is failing me. But 10 years later, you have World War I, where the airplane was the deciding factor. You know, another 20 years after that, you have a little less than 20 years, you have World War II, where aircraft were the deciding factor. Well, aircraft and the things they delivered, but mostly aircraft. If there were no aircraft in World War II, it would have been a completely different war. And moving on through time, 25 years later, you're on the moon.
But we're talking about flying without technology.
Yes. But the implication remains, because if you can fly, could that same magic that allows you as an individual to fly be applied to that cart of goods bound for market? If you can take that magic and apply it to your cart of turnips and get to market that much quicker, your produce is fresher, your sales go up, your production expands, your distribution expands, and now you have a turnip empire. There are massive economic implications to this being available to everybody.
There's massive implications if you can move product or move something else other than yourself with flying. If you can move more than you can carry.
Yes.
And can you do that in your world?
If you're smart enough to figure it out, there's nothing really holding you back. And that's the thing with my magic system. There are no set spells. I still call them spells and incantations and that sort of thing, but general arcane knowledge does not involve specific spells. There's no Wingardium Leviosa and Expelliarmus here. If you can picture something clearly in your mind, focus on it and how to achieve it, and then decide how much power it's going to take to do that and release the correct amount of power, you can do it.
But only if you have the ability to perform magic.
Yes. Which, for the most part, everyone who focuses on it can gain that ability to some degree. Some people will be better at it than others, but it's not beyond reason that every housewife in the country could light her cook fire with magic or boil that kettle with magic or something like that.
Why don't they?
Not everyone has that ability. It's been a largely lost ability for 3,000 years, and it's only really been pervasive again for a few weeks.
So I had a similar problem, the carrying the turnips problem, when I was designing my portals, right? So one of my main characters, he has the obligation of porter. He can use these personal porters to take people to other places. And the way that I have it working right now is that because he's so young, he's first year in college, he doesn't have a lot of experience or strength, if you will, to move more than another human. As he gets better at it, he'll be able to move bigger and heavier things. But right now he's pretty restricted on what he can move.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense to me. Experience should totally be a factor.
Right, experience and knowledge, and so that's as close as we have to flying in my world. And I'm not going to add flying to my world while humans being able to fly, because that changes my story. So I'm not adding it.
I wasn't planning to add it.
Besides, they can just hop on a blimp anytime they want to, or Zeppelin, or whatever they're called.
Yeah, but can you have awesome chase scenes flying through a city like Top Gun?
Why would I?
Because you can. Why would they make another Top Gun? Because they
can.
What do we want? Old Tom Cruise. When do we want it now? Ugh, I'm sorry. I watched Top Gun.
Did you?
Day. The new one.
You didn't put that on your watch list.
I forgot about it. If that tells you anything about the movie.
Oh, that tells me plenty.
Okay, so real quick bite-sized movie review here for anyone who cares. I know I'm late to the Top Gun Maverick game, but I'm late to most games these days. I enjoyed it. For what it was, I enjoyed it. That is not to say that it was a good movie. That is not to say that it was original, and that is not to say that I will watch it again anytime soon.
But you were entertained.
It is a blatant... I was entertained for 2.5 hours. The first half hour of which was a shot-for-shot remake of the first movie with old Tom Cruise.
You're kidding.
I am not kidding. The motorcycle down the runway chasing the plane, the whole 9 yards. Same music, same everything, all the aircraft carrier flight deck stuff, same thing, shot for shot. I played them side by side and watched.
Wow. They're going for nostalgia,
They were going for nostalgia. Yep. Exactly. They're going for nostalgia, and they succeeded. The nostalgia is there. But on top of that, the main plot of this movie is an exact ripoff of Star Wars A New Hope.
Really?
It is a complete ripoff of Star Wars. They were banking on nostalgia and forgot to write a new story.
Huh.
Which isn't a complete fail. It is enjoyable. It is good closure for the characters and all that sort of stuff. They brought back a ton of the original cast, which I thought was awesome. They shot at the same locations, all of that sort of stuff, and it was great. I had fun with it. They brought back Val Kilmer and all the big names were there. But if you're in it for nostalgia, you'll have a good time. If you're in it to have a good time and watch airplanes fly around, you will have a good time. If you're in it for a new and engaging story involving a nostalgic set of characters, good luck. It was interesting.
So, were you this insightful into stories and plot before you started thinking about writing your book?
I've always been a voracious reader. Like, I was the kid in 2nd and 3rd grade reading Lord of the Rings and things that the school library wouldn't even loan to me because they said I was too young. So I've read my entire life and have just kind of picked up on it. I wouldn't say I focused on it, but it's something that I've definitely paid more attention to as I got a little bit older.
I'm noticing as I'm learning more about writing and I'm, focusing on my book and the story and learning and all those things. Mm-hmm. My DNF file did not finish for books is taller than my finished reading the books pile. I just can't. I'm getting to the point where, I'm reading these books and I'm like, ugh. Where's the thing that's supposed to happen? Nothing's happening. These people are boring, and I get bored and frustrated so much quicker now in a book than I ever did before.
Mm-hmm. That's why I tend to have at least 1 or 2 other writers beta read my books.
Yeah.
Because writers are more sensitive to that sort of thing than your average reader.
Totally agree with that.
I'm sitting here looking at my bookshelf, which is a very, very small portion of my actual collection because most of it's in storage at the moment. I see 1 book on this shelf that I DNF'd. And it surprised me because I normally don't DNF books. I will suffer through it unless there is something that is just an absolutely massive turnoff to me. Which in a lot of cases is content related or character related. If there's no character development and the characters seem completely flat, I will usually give a book about to the halfway point to make me invest in anybody.
Yeah.
And if I can't do it, I'm done. Or with content, if I get into something that's a little too spicy, I'm probably going to put it down after the 3rd or 4th scene, just because that's not my shtick. That's not what I do. Like, I don't enjoy that. Those are my big turnoffs to DNF a book, but honestly, there's only 1 on my shelf right now, and I can think of maybe 3 more that I still own.
Yeah, if I'm a quarter of the way through and I don't feel anything, I don't have time. I got to move on.
If I went by a quarter of the book, some of my favorite books would be in a DNF pile.
Okay, I'll add it to my read again when I'm 80 pile, but right now I don't have time.
So, probably my favorite book of all time, which is saying a lot because I've read literally tens of thousands of books in my life. The 1 book that I consider my favorite book of all time, I DNF'd the first time I picked it up. I got about, I'm going to say probably 5 or 6 chapters in, and it just didn't grab me, and I gave up. And I took it back to the library and put it back on the shelf and didn't bother with it for about a year. It also has one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen, at least in my mind. I still adore this cover. If I could find a poster, it would be on my wall. The cover kept drawing me back in, and I finally picked it up again, and I'm like, I'm going to give this book another shot. And I pushed past that 5 or 6 chapters where I quit before, and within the next 2 chapters, I was hooked. And it is still, to this day, one of my favorite books, and probably the most read book that I own. And I have owned 3 or 4 different copies of it because I have worn them out. That's why at this point I give half a book before I finally decide to DNF something, because, sometimes that quarter or 5 chapters or 3rd or whatever your arbitrary marker is just isn't quite enough to get to the good part.
I think that is great advice. However, I will not be following it.
Rude.
My ADD does not let me choose what I want. But anybody listening, listen to Derrick. He knows. He knows.
For anyone curious about what that book is, it is called The Wings of a Falcon by Cynthia Voigt. The old 1993 library binding is the cover I'm talking about. It has since been retitled and is now known as Oriole's Tale, and I hate the new cover. But the old cover
If Derrick
is gorgeous.
can find a link to that old cover, he will put it in the show notes.
I will. It's beautiful.
So the next part, we do our next interesting thing in this podcast. It's our Google search of the week. Writing a novel is hard. It's hard work. Creating a new world adds like 10 times more complexity to your book.
It does.
There's so much that we have to learn and we have to think about, we have to understand. And it kind of means that we use Google a lot. Sometimes the Googles are funny, sometimes they're embarrassing. Last week's episode.
I'm never going to live that
Sometimes they're
down.
scary. Never going to live that down.
Never going to live that down.
Sometimes they put us on the FBI watch list. And sometimes we just get dragged down a rabbit hole. Derrick, did you have any interesting Googles to share?
Well, nothing to live up or replace last week in the annals of your torture devices and blackmail material. But I've actually, on the more mundane side of Google, I have been digging a lot into styles of European architecture. If you're going to describe something, you need to do it accurately. At least that's my opinion. Don't just be like, it was a building with plaster and a tiled roof. Be specific.
Yeah, I agree.
So I've been digging into that. What is that open walkway on the ground floor with the columns called? What is that? What kind of roof is that? What is the style called? That sort of thing. So I've been digging into that. I've been looking into a lot of Greek architecture, specifically like Renaissance era Greek architecture, which is a weird niche, but actually quite interesting if you start digging into it. But the more interesting thing I've been digging into is I took a really deep dive, no pun intended, into the physics of wingsuit flight. Specifically wingsuit flight. Because flying squirrel.
Okay, so by the way, listeners, we did not plan on this.
We did not. This just happened to be the topic of the week.
Just happened to be the top of the week, and it just happens to be what he was writing about. It was a total coincidence.
Completely.
We wing everything on this show.
Yeah. How to wing it like an author. We have to practice what we preach, right?
Exactly.
Yes. So, complete coincidence, but yes, I did a deep dive into the physics of wingsuit flight, which also, kind of parallel to that, forced me to brush up on my algebra, which was a whole nother Google black hole.
Ouch.
Yeah. I ended up in, physics equations with velocity and resistance and all sorts of crazy shit.
Fun
I hate math.
Stuff.
I hate math so much.
Yeah.
And I'm over here looking like I belong on Big Bang Theory with, marker boards, and yeah, it was bad.
Surprise, surprise. I actually love math.
Of course you do. Opposites attract.
But not addition. Don't give me your checkbook. I'll screw that up.
That's fair. So, yeah, I ended up diving pretty deep into that and figuring out, what sort of maximum glide velocity is possible in different, physical positions with a wingsuit, and how much altitude you lose over a certain amount of distance at that velocity, and things like that. Because that's essentially how this one character has figured out flight, was they saw a flying squirrel and then essentially conjured a magical wingsuit, and then figured out how to manipulate that in order to actually control the flight.
So this is one thing I appreciate about your writing, is this level of detail you get into very specific things.
It's depressing.
It's something you only have to show once or twice, but you really take that deep dive and make sure that your readers understand what's happening, or you give them lots of information to make them really feel involved in that moment.
It's the ADHD. I swear it is. Because I will fixate on the most random detail and then waste tens of hours on research for literally a 3-sentence throwaway paragraph that nobody's going to care about.
I'm right there with you.
Yes. No, I will do that. Although I think you did actually notice that and ask me questions about it in the novella.
Yeah, in the novella.
Trials of Tiarsis. I have one little throwaway scene at the end of the novella where it's a conversation between my title character Tiarsis and someone else on a ship, talking about how before he got there the ship was rigged incorrectly to gain the most speed from that ship, which is a really generic throwaway detail until it's not, in which case it had me reading 18th century treatises on the rigging of sailing ships and all sorts of ridiculous things. I spent
And
hours.
you too, audience, can spend hours looking for certain specific facts for your book. Follow along and learn more.
There's this magical thing called Google, and it is free to everyone. But yes, no, I will dive far too deeply into random details. This one I feel like was worthy of the research, the flight thing, but that other one was not, and I don't know why I put so much research into it. I just wanted to get it right. Because if somebody actually knows about boats and sailing ships and they read it and you get it wrong, they're going to notice.
Yep.
And that's going to break immersion, it's going to pull them out of the story, and even if it's 3 pages from the end, they still might not finish it because they're like, this guy doesn't care about what he's writing.
That could happen, yeah.
I've done it. I was reading a book one time years ago. I forget what it even was. For those that don't know, I'm also a professional photographer, and the main character of the book was supposedly a photographer. I put it down 2 chapters in because every photography detail was wrong. There wasn't a single redeeming factor to say that the author tried to get it right. So little details do matter. You don't have to become an expert in something to write a book that involves a subject on the fringes of the story, but if it is central to your story and is going to be involved a lot, do your research.
Do your research, yep.
I feel like it's worth it. And now that I've hogged all of our airtime, Xtina, what about you? Have you Googled anything interesting this week?
Actually, the thing that I'm working on right now is, in my world, there are 5 different types of humanoids. And I'm trying to, and I call them clades. Okay, so there's 5 different species of clades.
Mm-hmm.
Clades. What I'm trying to decide is what to call each different clade. So I have one type of humanoid that's amphibioid, amphibian-based, frog-based. I have one that's insect-based. I have a plant human, and I have a bird human.
Well, the plant is
I
obviously
have...
Groot. Marvel, if you're listening, that was a
Maybe
joke. No lawsuits, please.
So I'm trying to decide what to call them. Now, obviously, people would, think you call them amphibioids, florians, insectoids, avians. Yeah, did I get all of them? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then when you get to people humans, right, what do you call them? If they're all humanoids, why wouldn't you call people humans by their class, order, you know what I mean? Their
genus.
Their genus. Well, genus is way down the line.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's what I was looking at. I was looking at those classifications. Human actually is the word that means from the earth. Basically, is what it means, which is beautiful.
Yes.
So do I call them mammalians? Right, because that's when I go to kingdom, phylum, class, order, suborder, then down to genus. Primate is order and class is mammalian, and then amphibian is also class. Amphibia, insect. So anyways, that's where I did my deep dive today.
Ooh, that's a tough question.
So I don't want to call mammalian humans mammalians. I think it sounds stupid.
It sounds a little weird.
Yes. And so then I thought about calling them sapiens because we're Homo sapiens. But sapien actually means wise or astute, very smart, very wise. And humans, people humans, are no more smart than any of the other humanoids.
Right.
So that sounds, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make
that's
my
a case
humans.
where etymology becomes important.
Yes. So then I think, do I just call them walkers or uprights? And do I make up a word? So that's where my deep dive went today for my
Homo erectus,
was, which is actually our ancestor.
Oh, I know.
But they all walk upright.
Right.
So then, I thought, well, maybe.
Is there...
So anyways, that's where my deep dive.
Is there some, perhaps, indigenous culture you could pull a name from?
Which is where I basically got uprights, And most indigenous cultures call humans the people, just people.
Right.
Popol is a Mayan word, but people is what they call them.
I mean, you could go with that and just have it be a cultural thing and not have it be racist in any way, but have it be a cultural thing.
But see, is it just the people humans? I mean, is it the human humans that are people and the other people aren't people? I mean,
I
so
assume
I
they
am
would
still
all
trying
be people, just not necessarily included with that title when used as a group title.
So one of the premises of the story is that as part of inclusion, the university wants to take at least is looking for 5 students from the village, one from each clade. Right. So they
Gotcha.
want an amphibioid, an insectoid, an avian, a plant, a florian, and I don't know, I don't know. I have to figure out what I want to call a mammalian, but I don't know what to call it. I've thought about calling, doing the primate kind of, using a primate word, but that just means number 1, and again, I don't want humans to be above the other ones.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you get into a lot of cultural difficulties with that.
Exactly.
All that to say that building a world from scratch is really tough.
Exactly. It's not for the faint of heart.
It is not. It is a massive undertaking, and honestly, I've used this analogy before, probably not on the show, but if you have an idea for a story in your head, more than likely, so does everybody else. If you actually act on that idea and write something down, anything, a brief outline, a synopsis, a blurb, whatever, if you write anything down, you are further in that process than 90% of humanity.
Good point.
If you actually complete that story and write it all out and then never touch it again, you are now up into like 98% of humanity who has never done that thing, but you have. You are in that 2%. And actually publishing a story will put you into that 1%. And then publishing more than one will put you into, I think it's 0.26% of the human population currently.
I want to be a 0.26er.
I'm going to be there in about 3 weeks.
I know. You're rubbing it in. I know.
I'm doing a happy dance in my chair. I'm excited. I don't.
You should.
I don't
You've
mean to
earned
rub it
it
in, but I am excited. I've worked really hard for this.
You really have.
The whole point of that is if you have a story in your head and you want to write it, even if no one else ever reads it, if you write it, you have done something that 98% of people will never do. You have succeeded in something that the vast majority of people will never do. People get excited about professional athletes and how special they are. There's more athletes than writers who have completed a book. That's just what it is. This was another deep dive I did a few weeks ago. I dug into statistics. And yes,
Yay.
there are more professional athletes alive currently in the world than there are writers who have completed a manuscript. Not published, completed. So if you get that
That's
far,
amazing.
you are doing far better than most people ever will. And you are good at something, you have completed something, and that is something to be proud of. That's it. End of rant.
And with that, I think that wraps up our conversation for today.
I think it does.
Derrick, you want to share your social links?
Absolutely. You can find me online at derrickhalauthor.com. That will have all the updates and everything about the book. You can sign up for my email list there. That will also include a page on the podcast and a page on media coverage about the books. Everything I find, I put there. And then I can also be found on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, wherever, Twitter, as at dhallauthor. With the exception of Instagram, which is author_Derrick_Hall. Because I was too slow when I got that one. But everything else is consistent.
Thank you.
Christina, what about you? Where can we find you online?
My website is uniquelyxtina.com, and I'm on TikTok at _uniquelyxtina, and I'm on Facebook at uniquelyxtina, and I'm on Instagram at uniquelyxtina. And I may actually have a Twitter account, but I haven't used it in forever at uniquelyxtina. But anyways, that's how you can find me. uniquelyxtina everywhere.
All right, guys. Well, we've had a really great time ranting and going down rabbit holes while talking about rabbit holes. So thanks for joining us. We hope you come back next time, and we will see you then.
See you then.